Welcome to Executive Protection Insights. I'm Liam. People often tell me they love working private aviation because it's easier than commercial travel. No long security lines, no crowded terminals, no baggage claim, no waiting at the gate. I usually smile when I hear that because private aviation isn't easier. It's simply different. In fact, some of the most complex international advances I've ever managed involve private aircraft. The difference is that commercial aviation hides a lot of the complexity from you. Private aviation doesn't. You see every moving part. And once you start seeing those moving parts, you realize how many people have to quietly work together before a principal ever steps onto the aircraft. The flight department, the pilots, the dispatcher, the handling agent, the FBO and airport operations, fuel providers, customs officials, ground transportation, the local advance team, executive assistants, catering, maintenance. Everyone has a role. The executive protection team sits right in the middle of all of it. I still remember one of the first international private aviation missions I led. The executive assistant proudly told me, "This one should be easy. Private aircraft, small airport, no crowds, no terminal, no problem." I laughed, not because she was wrong, because I'd heard that sentence before. Whenever someone tells me an operation is going to be easy, I usually start asking more questions. The first phone call wasn't to the pilots. It wasn't even to the FBO. It was to the company's flight department. One thing I've learned over the years is that your relationship with the flight department is every bit as important as your relationship with the executive assistant. They know things nobody else does. Aircraft performance, crew duty limitations, fuel requirements, weather planning, alternate airports, maintenance restrictions, passenger manifest changes, estimated block times, things that directly affect your operation but rarely appear on the itinerary. During that first conversation, I asked a question I always ask. "Has the airport been confirmed?" The dispatcher answered confidently, "Yes." "Perfect." Now I had another question. "Has the FBO been confirmed?" There was a pause. People sometimes think an airport and an FBO are the same thing. They aren't. Large airports often have several fixed-base operators, different entrances, different handling agents, different operating procedures, different security requirements. Sending your driver to the wrong FBO is the private aviation equivalent of waiting at the wrong terminal in commercial travel. It happens more often than people think. Once the FBO was confirmed, I started building the advance. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about private aviation is that the FBO lounge is like an airline lounge. Comfortable chairs, people working on laptops, passengers waiting for boarding announcements. The reality is usually very different. Most FBOs aren't designed for people to spend an hour relaxing before a flight. They're transition points. The principal arrives, the customer service representative confirms the passengers, the crew finishes their preparations, maybe someone grabs a coffee. Then it's time to move. Everything happens quickly. That's why timing becomes much more important than comfort. Unlike commercial aviation, there isn't a boarding announcement echoing through the building. There isn't a boarding group. The crew is waiting for you. The aircraft is waiting for you. The operation is waiting for you. During my first visit to the FBO, I always ask exactly the same question. How do passengers normally board the aircraft? There are usually two answers. The first is common at major international airports. The passengers leave the lounge together in an FBO-operated shuttle. That shuttle is authorized to operate on the airside ramp. It drives directly to the aircraft. Simple, professional, very common. The second option is completely different, particularly at regional airports or smaller business aviation facilities. Your own vehicle may receive authorization to enter the ramp. Instead of stopping at the front entrance, the principal remains inside the SUV. Security verifies the vehicle. The gate opens. When throughout the gate, remember to stop and wait for the gate that closed behind you. The driver continues directly across the ramp until stopping beside the aircraft. The principal steps out of the vehicle and walks straight into the plane. From a protection standpoint, those are two completely different operations. If we're using the shuttle, I need to understand its capacity. Who rides together? Where does it stop? How long does it take to return for additional passengers? If we're using our own vehicle, I need to understand the airport's ramp access procedures. Who authorizes access? Do drivers require identification, vehicle permits, escort vehicles, temporary passes? Can the follow vehicle also enter? Can the luggage vehicle enter? Can the opening vehicle position itself near the aircraft? Every airport answers those questions differently. That's why assumptions have no place in advance work. I remember one operation where the executive assistant confidently told me, "The driver will take us directly to the aircraft." That sounded great, until I spoke with the FBO. "We're sorry," they said. "Only airport-authorized vehicles are allowed on the ramp." Our driver wasn't airport authorized, neither was the security vehicle. Instead, everyone had to transfer into the FBO shuttle. Had we discovered that on the morning of departure, it would have delayed the entire movement. Instead, because we'd asked the question during the advance, we simply adjusted the plan. No surprises. That's really what advances are all about. Removing surprises before the operation begins. One thing I've also learned is that not all FBOs operate with the same level of security. Some are located inside major international airports. Access to the airside environment is tightly controlled. Government credentials, airport badges, law enforcement escorts, multiple security gates. Others are small regional facilities where the operation feels much more personal. You may know every employee by name before the mission is over. Neither environment is better. They're simply different. Your advance has to reflect that difference. As we continued walking through the FBO, I asked another question that usually surprises people. Where do deliveries arrive? The customer service representative looked slightly confused. Catering? Everything. Fuel trucks, maintenance vehicles, laundry, cleaning crews, catering, waste removal. Because those movements often occur on the same ramp where your principal will board. Understanding how those vehicles move helps you understand how your own vehicles should move. Airports are carefully choreographed environments. Everyone has designated routes. Everyone has designated stopping points. The executive protection team should never become the reason the choreography stops. As we finished walking around the ramp, I asked the FBO manager one final question before we went back inside. What happens if the aircraft is delayed? He smiled. Which kind of delay? That's the right answer, because not every delay is the same. Maybe the crew is waiting on weather. Maybe the aircraft is still being refueled. Maybe catering hasn't arrived. Maybe maintenance is completing a final inspection. Maybe the inbound aircraft is late. Every one of those delays affects the operation differently. If the principal is already inside the FBO, that's one thing. If the principal is still 30 minutes away, that's another. Good advance work is understanding who needs to know and when they need to know it. One of the closest relationships I build on every private aviation mission is with the handling agent. A lot of people don't even know who the handling agent is. The passengers certainly don't. But they're often the person quietly coordinating almost everything behind the scenes. They speak with airport operations. They coordinate fuel. They arrange catering. They communicate with customs. They coordinate baggage. They know whether another aircraft is blocking your parking position. They know whether the crew has requested an earlier departure. If something changes, chances are they'll know before anyone else. That's someone I want in my phone. Not after the operation starts, before it starts. One operation still stands out in my mind. The aircraft was returning to the United States after several days overseas. Everything looked perfect. The principal wanted to land at a smaller airport much closer to the final destination. From a transportation standpoint, it made perfect sense. Shorter drive, less traffic, smaller FBO, less attention. Everyone liked the plan. Then I asked one question. When is Customs and Border Protection available? There was silence. The FBO manager checked his notes. Then came the answer. Only by prior arrangement. That completely changed the conversation. One of the biggest misconceptions about international private aviation is believing that if an airport accepts private aircraft, it automatically accepts international arrivals. It doesn't. Being able to land an aircraft and being able to legally enter the country are two completely different things. Many smaller airports don't have permanently assigned customs and border protection officers. Some officers travel from another airport. Some work only during scheduled hours. Some require advance notification. Some require overtime requests. Some don't process international arrivals at all. That means your aircraft might physically land there, but your passengers can't legally enter the United States there. I've seen people spend hours comparing hotels and motorcade routes while never asking whether customs clearance was even possible. That's the sort of question an advance should answer long before the aircraft departs. In our case, the planned arrival time created another problem. The aircraft was scheduled to land after the local CBP office had closed. The pilots could not land. The passengers couldn't clear customs. Now the entire operation had to change. Not because of weather, not because of security, because of government operating hours. The solution was straightforward once we understood the problem. Instead of flying directly to the smaller airport, the crew landed first at a larger airport where customs and border protection was available. The passengers cleared immigration and customs there. Only then did the aircraft reposition to the smaller airport closer to the final destination. Did it add a little time? Yes. Did it prevent a much bigger operational problem? Absolutely. That's why I always remind younger advance agents that private aviation gives you incredible flexibility. International borders do not. Governments don't adjust their customs schedules because your principal has an important meeting. You adjust your operation around theirs. Another area I spend a surprising amount of time discussing with the flight department is alternate airports. People hear the words alternate airport and immediately think something has gone wrong. Not at all. Alternate airports are part of good planning. Weather changes, runways close, aircraft experience technical issues, air traffic control imposes delays. An alternate airport isn't a contingency because you expect something to happen. It's a contingency because aviation plans for reality. Executive protection should do exactly the same. If the aircraft diverts, who meets the principal? Has transportation been identified? Can local drivers be activated? Does the advance package include that airport? Where is the nearest suitable hotel? Where is the nearest trauma center? Can the security team still maintain communications? Preparation doesn't eliminate uncertainty, it absorbs it. One of my favorite moments on any private aviation mission actually happens just before boarding. The pilots are completing their final checks. The line technicians disconnect the ground power. Fuel caps have been secured. The luggage has been loaded. The flight attendant is preparing the cabin. Everything becomes quiet. There's no boarding announcement, no crowd standing in line, no last-minute rush to find overhead bin space. The principal steps out of the vehicle, greets the crew, walks across the ramp, boards the aircraft, usually less than 2 minutes from vehicle door to aircraft door. It looks effortless. It should. Because behind those 2 quiet minutes are days of planning, conversations with dispatchers, phone calls to FBO managers, discussions with handling agents, coordination with airport operations, ramp access permissions, fuel planning, customs coordination, transportation planning, crew scheduling, weather monitoring, protective intelligence. None of that is visible to the principal. And that's exactly how executive protection should work. When the aircraft door finally closes and the engines begin to start, I always take a moment to look back across the ramp. It's one of the few places where you can truly appreciate how many professionals quietly work together to make one simple movement happen. Most passengers never notice. Most principals never need to. That's our job, to remove complexity from their day, to solve problems before they become visible, to make something incredibly complicated appear incredibly simple. Because that's what a successful FBO operation really is. Not luxury, not convenience, preparation. The next time you conduct an FBO advance, don't just ask where the aircraft is parked. Ask how the entire operation works, how passengers reach the aircraft, who controls the ramp, who controls customs, who controls access, who makes decisions when the weather changes, who you'll call when the schedule changes. Because the better you understand the people behind the operation, the smoother the operation becomes. And when the principal believes private aviation is effortless, that's usually the best compliment your advance could ever receive. Until next time, stay sharp, stay prepared, and stay operational.